Hello, I am Councillor David Boyes, Chair of this committee. Welcome to the remote meeting of the Safe and Stronger Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee taking place on the 4th of January 2021, which is being recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. Please be aware that any footage from the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I would like to give a warm welcome to members, officers and any members of the public or media who are watching this live feed of the meeting. Before I commence with the formal business on the agenda, I would like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. All participants must mute their microphone, blur their background where possible. To speak, use the chat function on the right hand side, type RTS request to speak. Remember, everyone in the meeting can see the messages in the chat function. When invited to speak by myself, remember to unmute your microphone. Once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and position unless you have already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. If you are having issues with connectivity, try switching off your video and use just the telephone function. If connectivity issues continue, you may have to leave the meeting and rejoin to get a better signal. If the chair's connection is lost, the Vice Chair, Councillor Heather Little, will take over until my connection is restored. Okay, so with that, I'd like to welcome the members of the committee and the co-opted members. Item 6 on the probation programme. We have a presentation by John Graham, Acting Chief Executive Officer for Durham Tees Valley CRC, and Kay Nicholson, Head of Area for Durham and Darlington National Probation Service. And item 7 on the bonfire activity, we have presentation by Stuart Errington, who, as we know, is the Chief Fire Officer for Durham and Darlington Fire and Service Rescue. And I'm delighted to announce that Stuart received the Queen's Fire Service Medal in the New Year's Award. So on behalf of the committee, well done, Stuart, and thanks very much for your participation today. And the Q2 performance management report, I think Jonathan Slee is going to be taking us through that as well. Okay, so with that, we'll go to the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Joyce Maitland and from Mr. Tony Cook.
Okay, any advances on those two? If not, do we have any substitute members?
We don't have any substitute members today, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Right, item 3 on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 20th of November 2020. Do we move them as a true record?
Agreed, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to go through the minutes page by page for accuracy. Any matters arising, if anybody wants to bring anything up, just let me know. So we go to page 3, page 4, which included the community protection update, page 5, page 6, page 7, which included the public Protection Service report, page 8, page 9, which included the Youth Justice Service performance report, page 10, page 11. Can I ask if the Youth Justice report got shared with the Commissioner's office at all? Does anybody know? No, if not, we'll go on to page 12, which included the County Durham and Darlington Hate Crime Action Group update, and page 13. Do we have any further matters arising of accuracy? If not, can we go to item 4 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest? Does any how many matters of
Councillor Turnbull, item 7, I'm a member of the Fire Authority.
Okay, that's noted, John. Thank you. Any items from co-opted members or interested parties? No. With that, then we'll go to the substantive part of the agenda, which is item 6, which is the probation programme. And these are regular updates we've been getting over the last 2 to 3 years, and I think there's some big changes afoot. So can I introduce John Graham and Kay Nicholson to give this report, please?
Thanks, Chair. Kay and I have discussed this. We've got 10 minutes, so rather than two of us actually presenting it, I'll just do the presentation and then we're both available for questions. Otherwise, it'll turn into a bit of Chuckle Brothers from me to Kay and back to me. So I'll just get on with it and do it. So hopefully, I shall be able to share my screen. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Not yet.
Not yet, John.
Oh. Has it come up yet? No.
No. Are you?
Oh, here we go.
Do you want me to see if I can share my screen, John?
Yeah, please, Kay, if you could. It's saying it's shared on here, but it's not coming up for some reason. So.
Yeah, something's coming up now.
Ah, that's great.
See
Thanks,
that?
Kay. Thanks, Kay. Oh, basic how-to guide on Microsoft
Yeah,
Teams.
that's all I can see as well. No, I'll try it again.
Chair, it's Jonathan. Would you like us to try for my screen?
Just a sec, I'm trying again. No, unfortunately, nothing's coming through.
But do you want to try, Jonathan? We've got 1 of 16 and take control. So, Jonathan, can you take over?
Is that coming through?
Yeah, that's come through.
Oh, well, that's absolutely bizarre because I can't see anything on my screen. Okay, if you can see the app, there we go. It's coming through now. Okay, so bit of a whistle-stop tour. So Maureen and I think Bronwyn Elphick, who was the previous chief exec for DTV CRC, came and spoke some time ago about the plans for the future models. The chair's already mentioned there's been some significant changes to what the plans were for probation. Rather than going through those, what the various iterations of that, I'll talk a little bit about the end state. So if you could just move on to the next slide, please, Jonathan. Okay. So where we're currently at is that probation services are delivered by a combination of the National Probation Service, which Kay is here representing, and she manages the Durham and the Darlington area, and the Community Rehabilitation Company, which in this area is DTV CRC, which covers Durham and the Old Cleveland area. The MPS is responsible for managing the high-risk offenders, advising the courts, allocating the cases to the CRCs, supporting victims, and managing the hostels or approved premises. The MPS does deliver some accredited programmes, and those are mainly to do with sexual offending. For the CRCs, we're responsible for supervising the low and medium risk offenders. We provide the through the gates resettlement services to release prisoners, and we deliver the unpaid work. I'm sure you'll all know it much better as community service, and the remainder of the accredited programme suite, which is about addressing offending. If you next slide, please, Jonathan. So, as I said, there's been various iterations, but we reached a point in May 2019 where the MOJ made some decisions in terms of what they wanted the future model to look like, which were a significant change. They identified 3 priorities at that time. One was about getting the change right, and there's been a lot of unsettlement, a lot of difficulties in the system following privatisation. Those are well documented. I won't go over those again. What I would say is that's not an issue we've had locally. DTV, which is run by ARC, it's a not-for-profit organisation, and any money that we have managed to make during the course of the contract has gone back into straight back into services, which has amounted to some £1.5 million this last financial year. The second thing that we were looking at, the system was looking at, was professional recognition. Probation has often been a bit of a poor relation in terms of, if you think about nurses, will undergo regular requalification, will undergo competency-based assessments. There's a recognition that probation needs to move to much more that kind of way of working. So we're looking at registration, we're looking at how continuing professional development will improve. And for the first time, you know, I've been in probation over 20 years now, and for the first time I can see a future structure which is going to bring us much better qualified staff, is going to bring us staff who are much more capable of working in the environment we're in. And the third area was maximising influence. Those of you who have been around a long time will know there are times when probation has operated within its own little silo and hasn't really reached out and worked with wider partners. There's an absolute recognition that reducing reoffending, protecting the public isn't just a probation job, it's a wider work amongst the whole community. And we need to work much better locally and regionally and nationally to influence that. So those were the 3 things that were driving the changes that were coming. So next one, please, Jonathan. So the plans for the future, what the final changes, what will happen is everything that was previously managed by the community rehabilitation companies will now return to the MPS and will be managed by the National Probation Service. So all those things we talked about, low and medium risk offenders, unpaid work, accredited programmes, resettlement, will all now go back to the National Probation Service. That will happen in June this year. There will continue to be what they are calling the dynamic framework, which will deliver wraparound and rehabilitative services, which will sit locally and will commission services to be delivered. There will be a role within the area that focuses specifically on that, working into community integration and contracting those providers to deliver those wraparound services. And the good news, as far as we were concerned, is the previous probation MPS region, the North East, covered Yorkshire as well. We've now moved to the real North East, so that split began in April 2020 and will be complete by June 21, and that will just be the Northumbria area, Durham and Tees Valley, and that will begin, as we say, that's already begun and will continue through to June. If you next slide, please, Jonathan. So there was a process last year in terms of bringing in a new probation director for the area who provide the leadership and the delivery of those services. That's the ex-Durham Tees Valley CRC chief, Bronwyn Elphick, who is now the North East Regional Probation Director. And I know Bronwyn is just setting up her structure. She's looking at how she reaches out into the community, how she reaches out and develops things like reoffending forums, works with the processes that are already there, such as the Reducing Reoffending Group and the Community Safety Partnerships. So that work's underway. Those 3 organisations that cover it locally, the MPS North East, Northumbria CRC and DTV, we will all come together in June 2021. That transition process is well underway. There's a huge amount of work, as you can imagine. Pulling something apart is always easier than trying to put it back together. And you can imagine that There are two CRCs who operate very differently, one that's a not-for-profit and one that's run by Sodexo, so they've got a different way of doing things. And then there's a centrally controlled National Probation Service. So trying to align those three services, you can imagine there's a huge amount of work to bring that back into one organisation. The North East itself will then be divided into what we're calling probation delivery units. Each of those will be headed up by an assistant chief officer grade. I'm pleased to say that Kay, who previously also worked for Durham DTV CRC, has replaced Maureen Gavin. Many of you will know Maureen. So Kay came into role at the beginning of December, and she will be the head of Durham and Darlington going forward. Next slide, please, Jonathan. I don't think it would be, if we're talking scrutiny, I think it would be a bit remiss if I didn't just also give you a quick update in terms of what's happening probation-wise in terms of COVID. I think I've said there, like every sector, the justice sector faces significant challenges. Particularly, I would highlight that the levels of face-to-face contact are limited by social distancing restrictions in the fixed estate. So previously, you may have had 10 interview rooms and you may have been able to get 100 people through the building in a day because of the cleaning, etc. You can maybe only get 40 to 50 people through the building in a day. So that automatically restricts the amount of people you can see face to face. Our unpaid work vans, if you think about the community service vans, they could carry up to 8 service users at any one time. Clearly with social distancing, we can only carry 2 at any one time. So we've moved to a different way of delivering. Our accredited programs involve groups of up to 12 people with 2 tutors, and the victim contact scheme, involved a lot of face-to-face contact with families, and they've had to move to utilising remote technology, and it's good to see there's no backlogs in that work, so we're engaging with the victims where we need to be. Resettlement work, if you can imagine how prisons are restricted, we've all no doubt seen the stories about the amount of time prisoners spend locked up. Well, actually, that impacts on our ability to work with those people pre-release. And clearly there will be significant court backlogs because of the difficulties the courts will face. Jonathan, if you can just move it on, please. So what have we done locally? Obviously, despite the challenges, you'll be pleased to know the levels of face-to-face contact in the Durham Tees Valley area, so that's both the National Probation Service and the CRC, are amongst the highest in the country. In terms of enforcement, when I talk about enforcement, I mean breaches of orders, recalls on licence, or anything involving the courts, that is fully up to date. So we have no backlog. That is not the same in other areas of the country where there are significant backlogs, London in particular. We don't have that, so our enforcement is fully up to date. There was a homeless prevention team which began during the COVID, during the last national lockdown, which the funding has been extended and brought and will carry on for that. So that's helped people who have been released from prison, who may be homeless, into accommodation. And that will also work closely with the Project Beta, which is already up and running between Durham County Council and probation locally. Our delivery of unpaid work, it says it's the 3rd highest. There's been a change since we've had that. It's now the 2nd highest in the country, and we're actually offering 131% of pre-COVID-19 hours. We've done that just by moving resource around and taking it from areas that were not classed. The government the MOD were telling us were not priority, so we've moved additional staffing to deliver there. We've got the 2nd highest rate of accredited programme delivery in the country at 85% of pre-COVID levels. MAPA SMBs have continued utilising the technology, and that's been taken forward as standard practice in the new MPS. And what's really, I think, a testament is HMIP, who are completely independent, have praised the probation response nationally and made specific reference to things that are going on locally and the responses of the MPS and DTV CRC locally, of how well we're managing the performance. And we received some information just before Christmas from the MOD's own internal audit function, which showed DTV CRC as the best performing CRC in the country in terms of our performance against the COVID-19 measures. So onto the final slide, please, Jonathan. There's a challenge though. The challenge is still, and it will go well beyond COVID and the impact of COVID, is there will still be backlogs. I don't mean enforcement backlogs, but if you think about courts, whilst they may be running and may be running nearly to full capacity, there is still a backlog of cases. As those cases come through, they will then lead to those cases coming onto our books, and then there's a backlog of work for us to do to try and catch up there. As I said, transition's well underway, but there's a lot to do in terms of merging three organisations. I think there's a way to go in terms of what the new structure will look like for the North East probation structure, and how we merge that and how we work and integrate that into the local existing structures. Hobby horse of mine, there's something around, and it's been around for a long time, around duplication. There is still duplication of funding going on. I can give you numerous instances of health and probation funding the same things. True collaboration, and by true collaboration I mean that is people sitting in a room coming up with the solutions. That's not about one partner presenting this as the solution and expecting everybody to get behind it. So there's a bit of work to do on true collaboration and joint commissioning, and this is the really difficult one, getting somebody to give up a little bit of their own to add to a pot so you can work on doing some joint commissioning. I think there's some work can be done there which helps with both duplication and true collaboration. And the challenge, again, those of you who will be aware, Durham, Tees Valley, Northumbria, in terms of the reoffending rates, we have a challenge. There isn't as difficult as it is in other areas of the country, and always a side effect of that reoffending is actually being able to protect the public from the more serious offences that also take place as well. So there is a challenge that there is about how we work together to also manage those things. I think that's it from me. If there's any questions, I think that's the next step, is it?
Yeah, it is. Thanks very much for that, John, and Kay as well in the background. It is reassuring to know that we seem to be getting things right up in the north, and hopefully these are things we can take forward as we all come under one umbrella. I'll take questions from the floor if people want to use the RTS function. In the meantime, I've got a couple of questions. When you say there's a backlog of cases that's going to have to come through the courts, and then there's going to be a knock-on effect by the time to get to probation, what sort of time scale are we talking about, John or Kay?
I think I mean I'm on the national, so I can talk a little bit about unpaid work community service, because I'm on the national steering group for that. And the reality is we are still going to be looking at a backlog after transition. We're still going to be looking at a backlog into the autumn of this year. That's without any restrictions that are coming in the next couple of weeks and the impact of what we've already moved to by going into TFR. So if I give an example that we are running up until the beginning of December, we were running at less than 100% capacity for unpaid work, and we were receiving orders at about 125% of our previous capacity. So in reality, that probably meant we were increasing the number of orders we had by 40 a week. Right. And that has been going on since potentially mid-July through to December. So you can see there's a significant number of orders that we have to filter through the system. So getting up to 130% and staying there is only going to manage that. Is not going to solve it in the next couple of months. That makes sense.
And is there any opportunities to increase capacity?
Yeah, so but I mean, obviously ours is a commercial contract because we deliver that aspect of it, but we've worked very closely with the MOJ in terms of increased funding to be able to bring additional resources in to deliver that. One of the biggest issues we've got is even when we've got additional staff and people to take through, one of the challenges we face is, if you can imagine, it's around welfare facilities. So if you rock up with 8 people, 12 people, turn up, self-report to some allotments or self-report to a community venue, we've got to be able to provide welfare facilities. So one of the things that we're looking for additional funding for and working around is things like portaloos or even a welfare cabin. So we're looking at all sorts of different ways and have implemented quite a bit of that. And we do quite a lot of work for Durham County Council. The councils are our biggest, the local authorities are our biggest provider of work, to be honest.
And I've just got one more question. You mentioned about the duplication of funding and trying to go into central port. Will coming under one umbrella, will that sort of help with regards to duplication and maybe like sort of sharing of different pots of money?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. Is the first is that centrally for the first time there's a unit being set up that requires collaboration between probation and health, probation and police. Now that might sound as if why hasn't that been there forever, but it really hasn't. But that's there for the first time, and some of that is about. So we've already seen one of the results of that, the integrated offender management strategy, which has just recently come out, which was a joint police probation piece of work. So there is a push centrally to identify where those opportunities are. I think then locally, once we need to be pushing back up, is my view, because we know better where that duplication is than London. So we need to do that work locally. I think there's a lot of work gone on in Durham through the Reducing Reoffending Group to identify lots of those and look at the needs activity. I think it's now about taking the next step. The second part to that is there is the dynamic framework money, which is there, and the competitions are ongoing for that at the moment. But there's also a regional innovation fund, which I think will be of interest, because that's about looking at potentially new ways of working. And that is where there may be some freedom in terms of being able to jointly commission and work together. But it's one of those things, isn't it? Somebody's got to take the first step. Somebody's got to be brave enough to do this sometimes.
Okay, thanks for that. I don't think I've got any other people wishing to speak at this particular moment. With that though, I'd just like to thank you and Kay for the report. It's very interesting. I'm pleased we seem to be getting things right in the northeast, and the fact that we're going to hive ourselves off from Yorkshire as well, as you just mentioned. We can do things on a local basis, can't we?
Yeah.
Not
yeah,
with anything against Yorkshire. I want that minute.
No, but it's great news. Yeah.
Right. So we'll just take us back to page 15 of the report. Members of the committee asked to note the information contained within the report and presentation and commented accordingly. We have done. Hopefully, once the new system's up and running, we might be able to get a report back again next year sometime possible. Okay. Yeah, thanks very much for your attendance, John. Thanks very much as well. So we'll see you again in the future, hopefully.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan.
Very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Right. Okay. We're going to item 7 now, which is it's titled Bonfire Period Activity. I think Stuart's going to be doing a report, but I think he's going to broaden out a little bit more as well to include other developments. So we'll pass over to you, Stuart.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and I'll attempt to share my screen, see if the technology is working from this end.
Yeah, we've got something up there now, Stuart.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. I'll just put it on presentation mode. Okay, yeah, good morning, everybody. And as the Chair said, I'm going to cover the bonfire period activity that we've seen last year in 2020, but also I'll widen it out and just cover some of the issues that we are facing with arson, because it's a particular issue for County Durham. Actually, it's a particular issue for the northeast of England, as you'll see. I'm not going to cover all of the slides that we've sent out in the pack, just one from a timing perspective, but really some of that was just background information for members. But obviously, I'll be happy to cover any of the issues that are in the slides in the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So really, what am I going to cover? I'll look at the sort of analytical view. What are the key data that we've got around that bonfire period? Interestingly, we cover the bonfire period not just on the 5th of November, bonfire night itself, but for a period of 2 weeks from the 25th of October to the 7th of November. And that's really just to make sure that we can even out any data. Obviously, if bonfire night follows or falls on a certain night, in particular on a weekend, then it's likely to be busier. So in order to smooth some of that data out, we look at it over a 2-week period as well. And I'll also cover in a little bit of detail towards the end just the level of arson that we are seeing in the county, where that's occurring, and probably more importantly for members, what we are actually doing about that as well. So just a few facts to consider. This year, the 5th of November was on a Thursday night. Very interesting, you'll see this from the data. 2019 was a particularly wet year. I don't know if members can think back, but there was quite a lot of activity cancelled because of the level of rain that we had, a sustained period of rain across that whole bonfire period in 2019, and that did really reduce the numbers down. In order to overcome that, we tend to look at it over a 5-year average as well, not just comparing to the previous year. But also this year, or last year in 2020, I should say now, very, very unusual year in terms of the COVID-19 restrictions, and virtually all of the organised displays that we would normally see were cancelled because of COVID-19. So again, we've reflected quite hard on how that has impacted on the data that we've seen, and it's fair to say we do think that it's had a fairly significant impact, and hopefully by the time we get into 2021 we will be through the COVID-19 pandemic, and those organised displays will be back on, and that will reflect back in the data that we've seen. So going on to the data itself, and you can see there, this is the overall incidence that we attended during that period, and it's broken down on a day-by-day basis on the top graph there. And you can see it gradually starts to increase as we get towards the 4th and 5th of November. We see that big spike on the 5th of November in the number of incidents. The green bar is this year's, and then you've got the orange bar, which was last year, and then the blue bar, which is 2018-19. And as I say, that's a typical trend where it builds and builds, and then we get a big spike over a 2 or 3 day period, and then it starts to level back off again. You can see there as well, compared to last year, we had a 35% increase. But remember what I said about the reduction in calls because of the weather in 2019. But we have seen an increase on the 5-year average, and we wouldn't have expected that given the restrictions around people grouping together because of COVID. We would have expected to see a reduction on the 5-year average, I think, and that's not the case. We did actually see an increase, so that's interesting from that perspective. Okay, from terms of a longer term trend though, what you can see there, we've taken the data back to 2009-10. The reason we go back to that was when we first started a new national reporting system called the Incident Reporting System, or IRS as we shorten it to, and that gives us a balance, a standardised approach to how we record all of these incidents, not just locally but across the country. So what you can see, for all that we are slightly up on the 5-year average, we are also slightly down on that 10-year average. You can see we peaked in 2009-10 there with 916 incidents, and it's down to 818 for this year. So overall, we are seeing a downward trend, but you know, it's been a very, very different time. And if we go back to the sort of 5-year average, you can see that's a steady increase in incidences as well, and that occurs for over the period and on bonfire night itself. Very similar graphs. And you can see on Bonfire Night itself this year, actually we were 23% up on the 5-year average, which is concerning given where we were at from a COVID perspective. So that's looking at overall incidents. But really, when we start to get into bonfires, we classify these as deliberate or not known secondary fires. And again, I'll come back to that a little bit when we talk about arson. But generally, that's how we would class a bonfire. Obviously, they're linked very closely to antisocial behaviour. We'll hear a little bit more about that when we talk in item 8 under the Q2 performance report. But arson-related incidents in terms of secondary fires very much linked to antisocial behaviour. So again, you can see this the 3-year data here across that bonfire period, and a significant spike on the 5th there, but pretty much following that normal trend that we get that I spoke about a little bit earlier. Where are the incidents actually happening then? This shows you the breakdown in terms of our station area. So the top graph is just this over the 3 years, the number of incidents that are occurring. What really stands out from that data is the big increase in Peterlee, the big increase in High Handenhold, and the big increase in Wheatley Hill. And again, in the Easington High Handenhold kind of area, we'll come back to when we talk about arson. The lower bar chart there just talks about it from where we've had increases and where we've had decreases. And the quantum of those increases. And again, what really stands out there in particular is the Wheatley Hill, Peterlee, High Handenhold increases that we've seen. I did have some decreases in Seaham, Newton Aycliffe and Crook, but fairly small compared to the increases we've seen in other areas. Again, similar, that was for overall incidents, similar experience in terms of those deliberate not known secondary fires on the Bonfire Night period itself. So very, very similar. You see the standout there is at Peterlee and High Handenhold. We also get quite a few false alarms around the bonfire period. This graph shows that that's almost static, though. Very, very similar across the 3-year period in terms of the bonfire period, 25th to the 7th, but also on the night itself. That's fairly static. A false alarm will be when we get called to a bonfire that is actually being ran as we would expect a bonfire to be ran, so that there's an adult present. This year in particular, there was the correct level of social distancing in place, and that there was no danger of it spreading. So what we would call a responsible bonfire being ran. We've been called to the incident, but actually the crews haven't taken any action, and they'll make that call on at the incident on the ground itself, and looking at a whole range of factors. What we also look very closely at is when do we see violence at work towards our staff, and again this is over that period. This has been a huge issue in the media over the last few years. I just want to reassure members that actually across Durham and Darlington we see a very low number of violence at work, either throughout the year, but in particular during this period. And it's one of the reasons that we haven't made a great deal around publicity of it. You've probably seen other fire and rescue services publicising this in quite a big way. Actually, we don't have those significant problems. There was 3 incidents of violence at work towards our staff over that period, and that's pretty typical. You can see the numbers for the previous numbers in 2019 and 2018, 2 and 4, so we're pretty much on that average. Obviously, every incident is a significant concern for us, especially if we're getting objects thrown at the crews. But they are highly trained in how to deal with that situation. They've got really good personal protective equipment and really good procedures in place. Unfortunately, we haven't had anyone injured over that period. So yes, we take them very seriously, but it is not as big an impact as in some other fire and rescue services. So just to summarise that part of the presentation, overall, yes, significant increase compared to last year, and a reasonable increase compared to the 5-year average as well. We see this in a very, very busy period on the 5th of November, and in particular, if you break it down into the hours, it tends to start about 4 o'clock and it tends to tail off around 10 o'clock. So we had 50% of our incidents on that day between that period of time, and obviously we do some specific work to increase the number of control room staff taking the calls at that time, the number of staff we have available on the ground, and obviously we work very closely with our neighbouring fire and rescue services in order to deal with incidents that are close to the border and spread that work around in a slightly more increased way than we would do in a business as usual environment. So again, procedures that were tried and tested and put in place there to deal with that kind of incidents, and in particular around the bonfire night itself. Again, similar trend to what we've seen throughout the period. Well, big increase on last year and an increase on the 5-year average. And on that night itself, 10 of the stations seen an increase in incidents there. We just get a bit more specific now about what the issues are around arson in County Durham and Darwen. It is a specific concern for us, and I'll show you why and why that's actually spread across the North East. But if we just remind ourselves of what arson is, because I think this is important. It is a crime where someone is intentionally starting a fire in order to cause damage or destroy something, in particular a building. So that link to crime is really important. How do we measure it? I covered this a little bit earlier on. We look at it from 2 angles, really. One is around deliberate primary fires, so that's generally things that have a value. Buildings, vehicles, crops, woodland, etc., but also deliberate secondary fires as well. That's rubbish, waste ground, grass, etc. And obviously that's why bonfires come into that secondary fire category. So just want to show you some data about what we are like in terms of the rest of the country. You can see there on the bar chart, that's all standalone fire and rescue authorities, and Durham is the red there. So we have more deliberate primary fires per 100,000 population. Obviously, we look at it from a population basis rather than just overall numbers. But we have the biggest issue with deliberate primary fires in the country. When I said this was a North East specific issue, you can see the next 2 are Tyne Wear and Cleveland, and even fairly rural Northumberland is in the upper quartile there. So big challenges there in terms of deliberate primary fires. Vast majority of our primary fires are road vehicles, and again I'll come back to that in a little while. What does that mean in terms of a 10-year trend in deliberate primary fires? You can see a fairly steady increase. So if we think back to overall incidents, and I showed you that 10-year trend was downward trend, this is why the arson-related issues are causing us an issue. We've got that overall trend is increasing. Although we peaked in 17-18, and I'll explain why we've done some things differently since then. Overall, that trend is still an increase. So that's the primary fires. Similar story though when we look at deliberate secondary fires as well. You can see we're in the red there as well, so we're 3rd busiest in the country, again per 100,000 population in terms of deliberate secondary fires. Cleveland, significant issue there, and also Tyne Wear, and again Northumberland still in that upper quartile as well. And again, very similar trend in terms of the 10-year trend of deliberate secondary fires. Again, last year was when we peaked in 18-19, but still a fairly significant increase compared to the low numbers we saw in well, certainly in 12-13, very low numbers, and we've had significant increases pretty much year on year up until 18-19, when we started to see a decrease last year. Where are these occurring? Again, no different to the bonfire period. Pretty much 50% of all the primary fires occur in Peterlee and Wheatley Hill, so that's across two of our station areas, and 73% of them, as I said, are vehicle fires. If you go back to those 2009-10 numbers, vehicle fires were very, very low, and we started to see a fairly significant increase over that period of time. Secondary fires is not a great deal of difference, although we see high hand and hold coming in the game. We saw that throughout the bonfire period as well. So rubbish, grass, ghost, that kind of fire, high hand and hold creeps into the area with Peterlee and Wheatley Hill. What are we doing around arson and to try and get a handle on this? Well, in 2019, we restructured the service, put an awful lot more resource into the arson and created a brand new arson reduction team, really focused on this. We're doing that team's doing an awful lot of educational activity. This is really focused around the secondary fires, and hopefully you can see from the incidence numbers that they've started to have a fairly big impact around that. They also run diversionary activities, so this is where we've got arson champions in various schools who are working with us, providing information into the schools. Obviously, that's been challenging this year because of COVID, and we've had to shift a lot of that to online. But a lot of the primary fires, so a lot of those vehicle fires, we know are linked to organised crime groups, the various activity that's going on, and either as a punishment, the vehicle fires, but often it can be linked to illegal money lending as well. People tend to have their vehicles insured third-party fire and theft as a minimum. Therefore, if the vehicle is burnt out, then an insurance payment will come, and that can be linked to people wanting to repay to illegal money lending activity. So obviously, it's important that we're working very closely with the police around that. We aren't going to be able to solve that through education. Some of that's got to be multi-agency work. And again, with secondary fire, a lot of it can be linked to illegal fly tipping. So again, very, very important that we work with local authorities, community wardens, housing associations there. So there's a lot of work going on across that area. Because arson is such a big issue for the North East as well, we've just kicked off a fire and rescue service collaboration across the North East, where we're going to involve a couple of universities to really try and get an understanding of what is driving that behaviour and why do we see such significant numbers in the North East compared to other areas in the country. We know a lot of this is linked to deprivation, but we really want to have some academic rigour into some of that thinking and challenge some of our own thoughts around that. So a huge amount of work going on, started to have an impact over the last couple of years, but as you can see from the numbers, we've still got an awful lot of work to do across a number of different agencies to tackle this problem. Chair, I'll pause there. I'm happy to take any questions or comments across any of those areas that I've covered.
Okay. Can I remind members to use the RTS function if they want to get in, if they want to make a comment, ask a question. But thanks very much for that report, Stuart. It's reassuring in some sense that we haven't got the idiots like targeting our crews to the same extent they are in some other areas when you are going out doing a really dangerous job. But there are some major challenges which you referred to, and I'm sure that some of the questions are going to be asked about that. Can I just start off with one? And when you mentioned about the bonfire fires and the secondary and primary arson fires, and it just seems as though the vast majority of them are over the east. just a continuation of the other, if you like.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it is, Chair. We have a significant issue, and I think, you know, members who've been on the committee for a while will know we did some concentrated work around this a couple of years ago, and has had some impact. We can see in the last couple of years the figures have started to come down, but it is a huge issue for that area in particular. 75% of the vehicle fires that we get occurring within the Easington area is a significant concern for us.
Yes, I can imagine. Right, I've got quite a few people wishing to speak, so if you can try and make your points succinctly as possible, and I'll only ask you back in again if we can get through the rest of the people. I've got to start off with Councillor Crute.
Thank you, Chairman. I've lost connectivity for the last minute or two, so I don't know if my question's already been covered. It was largely about the primary and secondary fires, and Stuart's partly answered my question right at the end when he spoke about, you know, what the fire service are actually doing about the figures certainly on primary deliberate fires. How do we know that they'll be making progress though? Because I've had a quick glance through the performance management figures, and I don't see anything referring to primary or secondary fires, and I don't know if those figures are actually covered in the antisocial behaviour issues, because I read the preamble to the performance management report last night, and it looks like some of the environmental issues that we see going on, such as primary and secondary fires, might well be covered by other issues in performance management, such as antisocial behaviour. So I think from what Stuart's talking about, when you look at the rate of primary and secondary deliberate fires, we need to get a close grip on this as a committee if we can help the fire and rescue service in any way in tracking their progress, because clearly there's a lot of good work going into it, and Stuart's right, there's a lot of work to carry out as well. But I'd be interested to know how we're going to know when those figures start coming down, and where those initiatives that Stuart has spoken about are having the biggest impact. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple other people, and then if you can take it three at a time, Stuart, that's okay. It's remiss me, I should have said Joyce, Councillor Charlton was first, so if you want to come in now, Joyce.
Right, thanks, Chair. Stuart, I know there has been an increase across the county, especially in my area. I've noticed a lot of fly tipping. Maybe because of the waste centres obviously being closed for quite a few weeks. Do you think maybe that could possibly have been a factor with the arson attacks with fly tipping?
And Councillor Turnbull. You're on mute, John.
Right, Stuart, thanks very much for the presentation. John Turnbull, Brandon Division. The problem I've got seems to be happening, and it's not just happening around my ward, I've picked it up in other areas, is the length of time people are reporting to the council to get stuff took away. They're paying for beds and mattresses to be taken from outside the properties. When they get the delivery of a new mattress or a bed, they then report it throughout the council, and it takes 2 to 3 weeks. Then beds and mattresses stand outside of them properties for 2 to 3 weeks, and we're finding a big uptake of young children starting to run around and pull these mattresses away and take them off into fields and other areas and set and fight them. Is there anything we could sort of try and look at rejigging the system so it's done quicker?
If you'd like to take those, Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I will. Yeah, to turn to Councillor Crutz's point first of all. Yes, the numbers are in the performance report, but not as explicit, I think, as they were previously. I think as we've tried to reduce down the number of indicators that come to the committee to give, by default, to give clarity, actually, the numbers are hidden away. I think just to reassure members, they do get discussed in significant detail at the Safer Stronger committee itself. And obviously the Fire Authority are looking at this very, very closely. In terms of how we give more detail to this committee, more than happy to present this as a fairly regular item or an annual item if the committee wanted to do that. I do think it is important from a scrutiny perspective that the right level of scrutiny is placed on this. It is a big issue for the whole of the North East, and in particular for Durham. And then when you narrow it down into the Easington area as well, I think it is a big issue, and would welcome the additional scrutiny that would be applied through presenting it fairly regularly at this committee. If we look at the fly tipping issue and then linking that into the position with the household waste recycling being closed over a couple of weeks, we didn't see, for all fly tipping is a huge issue. I don't think a lot of it is domestic fly tipping. A lot of the fly tipping that we see, and again the council have done some really good work around trying to prosecute people, is when it is linked to work that's going on, rather than people tipping it from their own homes. We worked very, very closely over the COVID period and through the local resilience forum with the council to just understand the impact that we were seeing from the waste recycling centres being closed. The impact there tended to be around people burning off garden waste, and actually an increase in false alarm good intent, as we would call it. So we were getting called to people seeing smoke in people's gardens, when actually that was again controlled burning, and people were burning off the garden waste there, and generally didn't cause us a significant amount of problem. Fly tipping is a huge issue. It's one of the areas that we're working with the local authority. One of the initiatives we put in place there. Now our crews can report directly in to the local authority on this. So if they're out and about doing normal activity, or we do some patrols now in some of the high risk areas as well. Our crews can now report that directly into the local authority so that they can respond quickly and get that rubbish removed as quickly as possible. But obviously we're still suffering from austerity across all of those agencies as well, and we've got to deal with the resources that we've got, and we know that that's a particular issue for the local authority. So we're doing a lot of work, linked very closely in with Durham County Council with this, but I still think there's probably more to be done is the answer to that as well. And again, that very much linked to Councillor Turnbull's point as well. Yet the quicker that we can get any of that waste removed, the better. And again, I think that's something that we just need to link in very closely with the local authority and make sure, one, there's a good system for reporting it, that people understand what the process is, and potentially ask for it to be collected on the day that the new mattress is getting delivered, if that's possible, or the new furniture is getting delivered. Just trying to really improve people's understanding about how the system works, so that we aren't getting things left outside people's houses for a significant period of time. But again, there's some personal responsibility there with people as well. So I think it's about educating as well as improving the systems.
Yeah, thanks. Before I bring the next couple of people in, just with regards to what you just mentioned there about sort of intelligence on the ground, if we can sort of join with the local authority, with the fire service, with the police, as you recall, we did a thing before about the home visits, and I think with the fire service, it is a very trusted blue light service, and you were able to get a lot of information from residents, which was able to feed into a central database, which has been very, very effective. And I think if we could maybe look at something on a similar line going future, I think that would be good, because as you know, over my area, we do seem to have a lot of arson with regards to rubbish that's being left outside and empty properties, which become a target for arson and antisocial behaviour. So I'm very interested in looking at that. So, right, okay, with that, we've got another 3 people list to speak, so we can take these 3 again. We've got Councillor Beattie, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Stevenson. So over to you first, Alison.
Councillor Alison Beattie, Pelton Division, also a member of the Fire Authority. Stuart's already aware of my concerns about the, I want to call it a blip at High Handhold, and the way that that's actually moved to sort of, you could say, second worst position of sort of fire station areas. I'm a little bit concerned about the sort of the linkages with fly tipping, as has already been alluded to by a few councillors, and the lack of pickups or the perceived lack of risk. And although I appreciate that the Fire Authority does join up with the local authority and the wardens teams, I think there's an awful lot more work could actually be done there. I've had very recent experience of a car that was actually left in, ironically, High Handhold's area. It was an abandoned vehicle. It was actually there nearly 7 days before it was actually removed, and the police didn't perceive it to be a risk, either from its location, which it was a massive risk, it was in a one-way system, but also from a fire authority point of view. So although I know there's an awful lot of work being done, I think there's an absolute lack of understanding on the ground from some people and some of our services. Likewise, I don't think we're very good, and I say that as a local authority and almost as a fire authority, for promoting I want to say sort of the problems that we've actually experienced, because locally I don't think the High Handhold fire station area understands what the implications were, certainly over the bonfire period, because of those incidents that actually occurred. Some of them were illegal bonfires, some of them were other things, but I do think there's a little bit of a promotion issue that we've actually got to do when we've got all of that information together. And I do think it should come out as a joint statement from the authority, from the fire authority and from the local authority, as to what some of those issues actually are, because as I say, I do see it as a massive problem, and I was very disappointed in that incident 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Councillor Wilson, Christine.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I'm Christine Wilson, councillor for the West Auckland ward, and at one time we had one of the highest rates of secondary fires in the area. Fortunately, we don't have as big a problem now. Obviously, the fly tipping is still a massive thing in our area, like it is in everybody else's. But what they did, they got the culprits who were starting these secondary fires. They took them down to the police station and showed them around the cells. They were just kids. And then they took them over to the fire station and showed them how the fire service worked. It must have shocked them a little bit, because, as I say, the incidents have dropped quite a lot now. We still do have them, but not as many as we had. So hopefully it has shocked some of the kids. But another thing that worries me is the tax on the firemen when they're attending incidents. How does the fire service cope with this? And when they're being attacked, can they not turn the horses on them, on the yobs?
I think we all like that, Christine.
Well, I know, David, but it really annoys me when you hear of these incidents where fire...
I think Stuart's referred to, we don't seem to have a problem, touch wood, at this moment in time. I know Tyne and Weir have a bigger problem than we've got, but I think that's something we can look into. I'm sure Stuart would like it if we could do that. But I'll bring Councillor Stevenson in, and I've just noted Councillor Avery as well wants to come in as well. So we'll bring those two in to finish off.
Okay. Thanks very much, Stuart, for the presentation. Jeanette Stevenson, I represent Anfield Plain Division. I really appreciate all of the statistics that you've given us there, but my biggest concern is we don't have a problem with the secondary fires with regard to fly tipping in our area. All of ours are linked to antisocial behaviour, drug taking, drinking of young people. And what they're doing is, in an area that is a nature reserve, is just setting fire when they're sort of high, to all of the gorse, which naturally includes wildlife and things like that. But these fires are constant, but they don't get reported to the fire service. So my biggest concern is, yes, it doesn't look terribly bad in Consett, which is our local fire station, but the reality is that it is really, really bad. But it's a sort of hidden problem.
Okay, I'm going to bring Brian Avery in, but I think Councillor Crew wants to make a quick comment about a cross-cutting issue that we could maybe bring this forward to. Rob?
Yes, thanks, David. It's just a point I've raised in the chat function, because Joyce Charlton and John Turnbull and Alison to some extent have raised that link between fly tipping and how quickly it's picked up and the incidence of primary and secondary deliberate fires. What I'm suggesting is when that's considered again, because the Environment and Sustainable Communities Scrutiny Committee have already picked this up. They've been looking at issues related to environment and cleanliness, how often antisocial behaviour is picked up, and they had all of us shared at a recent meeting where they were looking closely at those issues. Yeah. If we're going to look at this through performance management, for example, I would suggest that when this is considered either by this committee or by the Environment and Sustainable Communities Committee, then there's a joint meeting where members of one committee is invited to the other meeting as well, because it's a bit pointless if we go and look at this through Safer, Stronger and look at it again through Environment and Sustainable Communities when it's a joint issue. So I think it needs to be addressed jointly as well. So it was just a flag up, Chair, that this has been picked up with the Environment Committee, and I think there's scope there for both committees to pick it up jointly. Thanks.
I think you're dead right. I think you're dead right, Rob. So that's something we can look into afterwards with the officers. Right, I've just got Brian Avery now. I'm not going to take anybody else because this can go on forever and ever. So I'm going to finish off with Brian Avery as the last comment questioner. Thanks, Brian. Are you there, Brian?
I say I'm Brian Avery from the Freehill Ward. Thank you, Chairman, for letting me speak. Well, this is like the same old story that we heard last year, and I personally can't see much improvement at all. I'm not blaming the fire authority, because I think the fire authority, it's got to pick up the mess when every other authority or every other area has sort of not paid attention to this, or not enough attention, I don't think. Because I'll get problems every day like this, and I've got to report it, not once, but 3-4 times due to the normal channels, till I get sick and then go to Oliver Sherritt or Alan Patrickson. But we shouldn't have to do that. Now, I think the councillors has raised a lot of very, very good points, and I agree what Rob said there, to have this joint meeting. But the county council must get on top of clearing the place up more quickly. You know, yes, people do report that they've got this to remove and this, that and the other, but a lot of them don't. They throw it out. And it can stay there for weeks and weeks and weeks if May or my other councillor colleagues don't report it. We shouldn't have to do that for a start. Now, I know there was a good scheme that the CAT team goes into various areas. In the last meeting, I heard this, that the CAT team in the Easington area, where a lot of these problems is happening, we're going to have the county council were going to put a team in after the CAT team had come out, so that they could continue the good work that the CAT team did. Because in my area, when the CAT team was in, they seemed to get everything moved pretty quickly. But as soon as they move out, we're back to the normal rigmarole of wardens going about. Well, fair enough, we might not have enough wardens, but the system isn't working. Now, it goes on for years and years and years, the same type of system. So I agree, get together with the chief officers and let's sort this out. I've just been on this morning about the same type of thing when I've seen various things this weekend. But it always takes so long to do a job, you know, during the normal channels. I know this problem with the cars, setting fire to cars. I don't know why it just really appears in the eastern area. And fortunately, we don't have it in Freehill. I hope we never do have it. But, you know, the police should be more involved in this as well, I think, because there is a problem with this sort of thing in Easton.
I'd like to thank you for your contribution, Brian. I think you're dead right. There is a problem, and it is something we need to. It's something we need to address as a number of agencies. You know, we can't put this up just on the fires. You're dead right. I've got about 7 or 8 calls to make after this meeting, and I'm sure my council colleagues will have a lot that's happened over Christmas and New Year that we've got to get reported, and a lot of the things you've referred to. And it is an issue that we need to all take on board as councillors, as communities, as like sort of officers of the council. So anyway, I'll pass back to Stuart to like sort of go through those particular issues, if you might.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So looking at Councillor Beatty's question first, and in particular around high hand and hold, and again this link back to fly tipping. So you know, no doubt about it, fly tipping is a significant issue, not just in high hand and hold, across the whole of the service area. And the solution to that, I think, is quite complex. You know, and it's a balance of resources around making sure that the waste recycling centres are open and accessible to everyone, making sure wardens are in those areas that there is fly tipping, and they've got the right camera equipment so that they can report it, and actually then the police can become involved. You know, we've mentioned the community action teams, that you know they have a great impact over a small period of time. And can go and really make a difference in an area. But what we also need to do is concentrate on changing the culture that is leading to the fly tipping in the first place, and really understanding that, because if not, we are just going to pile resource into solving a short-term issue. Actually, the longer-term issue is to stop people having that behaviour in the first place. And I think that's a mixture of education and enforcement. And again, that's got to be with the local authority and the police, as well as ourselves. So it is a fairly complex issue. Turning to Councillor Wilson's issue, yeah, West Auckland in the past was an issue. Again, lots of good work has gone on there. We've tried to learn from that. I think the problems are slightly different in West Auckland to what we're seeing in the Easington area. In particular, a lot of what is going on in Easington is linked very much to organised crime. And you know, the primary fires are the biggest issue that we've got there. We've got similar issues with secondary fires, and we see that in other areas as well, but in particular the impact around primary fires. This is what the Phoenix Fire Champions work is looking at as well, around getting to understand what causes those individuals to set fire to gorse and grass, again similar to Councillor Beatty's point, linking in with the local authorities around removal of fly tipping and illegal waste dumping, etc. Absolutely getting them to understand the problems that it causes for a fire and rescue service, and the issues for policing as well. You know, I'd love to say we could turn the hoses on the culprits. Actually, I think that would be counterproductive. It sounds as if it would be the right thing to do, but you know, looking at the way that our crews deal with the public, and in those situations, they are really experienced and really successful, and I think that's why we have that low number. But again, it is, you know, we have CCTV on all the appliances as well. It is also about prosecuting those that do it. It isn't just about education as well. But I generally believe we're dealing pretty well with that. I think Councillor Stevenson's point around the antisocial behaviour, yes, again, it is linked very closely. I'd like to think the vast majority of incidents were reported to us. We tend not to, and I spent 7 years of my career working in concert. It would only be a very small fire that wasn't reported to us. Generally, they are reported to us. And actually, in Anfield Plain, we're doing some across Concert and High Andenhold area. We're doing something slightly different with a crewing arrangement that we introduced through COVID, where we've got crews on a small targeted response vehicle. They're dealing with that kind of incident. Obviously, that's providing a presence in the high risk areas as well. So we'd like to see that encourage the right kind of behaviour. And then again, I think linking in with Councillor Avery's point just be reassured, we work really closely with the local authority on this. You know, I have a monthly catch up with the director from the council, Alan Patrickson, who's responsible for this. We work very closely with Oliver Sheriff. You know, one of my officers chairs the Safer Stronger committee as well. You know, so we are absolutely tied into it. But it also does come back to resources as well. Be really interesting. We'll hear in the performance report at item 8 about the Safer Streets initiative. We really see that as being a significant targeted response in the area that would probably have the biggest problem with this. But the resources that are being provided centrally to do that are fairly significant as well. If we wanted to do that across the whole of the Easington area, we're talking about a fairly big investment, and I think that has to come from outside, from central government, to really solve some of these problems. To be honest, that's some of the aim of this project we're doing across the 4 fire and rescue services in the northeast. We really want to highlight what the issues are, have some academic rigour, and potentially use that as the basis for increased funding, not just necessarily for the fire and rescue service, but for local authorities and for policing, so that we can, you know, get a grip of these problems. So appreciate everyone that it is a big issue. Really, thanks for all the challenge with this and all the questions around it, and also the interest and the support that all the members have expressed in wanting to solve it. And really supportive of Councillor Croot's suggestion around linking this across a number of committees, so we get that level of interest and that level of engagement that we will need to really make a big difference going forward.
Thanks. Thanks very much for that, Stuart. I'll just quickly run through what the members have gone through. Well, Phil mentioned primary, secondary fires, whether the initiatives that are in place are having an impact. Joyce mentioned about the COVID impact on fly tipping and on performance. John Turnbull asked about quicker responses from the council and from other agencies. Alison asked about the high handhold case issues. And better at making reports and making people aware of what's going on. Christine mentioned about arsonists, and maybe we can like sort of look at other measures to try and get them to stop. And it was an interesting point what you made about taking people into the fire stations and seeing what the consequences of what they're doing. Maybe that's something else we could be looking at. Jeanette mentioned a lot doesn't get reported with regards to antisocial behaviour and fires. And Brian Avery's mentioned we need to, as agencies, get rid of potential arson areas quicker, i.e. rubbish and stuff like that. I think that's more or less the report. But as Stuart's mentioned in his report, this isn't something that's unique to County Durham. It's something that's unique to this is something that's happening all over the region. And so we maybe need to have a region-wide initiative and looking at things like that. But I think the report that Stuart's given, we need to get this out to our members of the public. I think Jeanette Stevenson's right and Alison's right. We need to be making sure that our members of the community, our people who we serve and represent, them, knowing what's going on, the cost to the community, the cost in economic issues that this is having on us. So thanks very much. That is a fantastic report, and I'd like to thank everybody who's contributed. So thanks very much, Stuart, and members of the committee. With that, we'll go back to the recommendations, which was to comment accordingly and note the report, which we have done. So if we can get on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the Q2 performance management report. We haven't got Tom, but I think, Jonathan, you're going to take us through the report.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, is it taking Tom's take the report through members through the report this morning in Tom's absence. In the report was cover the period July to September 2020. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you. I think you're frozen on the screen, but we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of the report itself, if I can take members to pages appendix 2 to the report, which starts on page 64 of the pack. of which covers the report itself. Will cover the 5 key questions within this area around effectiveness of tackling crime and disorder, antisocial behaviour, reducing misuse of drugs and alcohol, and tackling abuse of vulnerable people, domestic abuse, child exploitation, radicalisation, and the final area about how do we keep our environment, including roads and waterways, safe. Chair, the infogram on page 65, that kind of highlights some key messages around overall crimes decreased. There's been a small increase of 4% in violence against the person in the 12-month period up to the 30th of September. In relation to ASB, the report highlights in paragraph 7 of the report on page 66 some activity there which is undertaken to address ASB across the county, in the Durham area, also over on the east of the county, in relation to off-road motorbikes, fly tipping and arson, of which we've heard within Stuart's report, and also across other areas of the county. Reducing reoffending, we've had the presentation this morning from the service, and in relation to the Safer Streets initiative, as Chief Fire Officer mentioned there, some of the activity that's ongoing in the east of the county. Members will recall the presentation we had from Joanne Waller in November, which focused a lot more detail on this area. In relation to drugs and alcohol, misuse of drugs and alcohol service, during this quarter, as paragraph 10 highlights, this reported activity related to ASB, alcohol-related SBs increased by 26.7% compared to this period last year, of which that's been monitored. ASB levels are being monitored at the local level by the police in that area. And in relation to vulnerable people, domestic abuse, domestic violence, as members recall a presentation in September at the committee's meeting. In terms of incidents reported within the report, showing a 2% increase in compared to Q1 of this previous year. But in relation to August and September this year, incidents has decreased by 21%, which is the lowest figure that's been recorded in recent years, as the report highlights. There's new systems being implemented to report on domestic abuse incidents through a triage system, which that includes activity by the MASH, which is a multi-agency safeguarding hub. In relation to road safety, is it the performance tables, which is included on page 76 of the report, highlights the sort of current position of where road casualties are at present, indicating then compared it to current levels at 178 for number of people killed or serious injured on road traffic collisions, compared to 233 for this time, that period of year previous, and also would highlight an increase in number of children who have been killed or seriously injured in road traffic incidents from 11 to 16. And at that point there, Chair, I'll pause for any questions on the report, noting I'll get any responses back.
Okay, thanks for that, Jonathan, and I know we just landed that on you, so thanks for taking us through that report so well. Do we have any questions, comments for Jonathan that we can take back? I've got Councillor Crute.
Thanks, Chairman. It'd be interesting to see what's actually happening with incidents of domestic violence. I mean, it's good news, of course, if it's been reported that's down by 21%. But it does seem to be counterintuitive. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I think everybody would have assumed that incidents of antisocial behaviour would have gone through the roof. Now, I'm a little bit confused about the narrative to the report on page 66, where they're talking about incidents of violence against the person, which have gone up by 4% in the last year, but 7% in Q2. Now, those figures incorporate domestic violence incidents as well, so you might assume from those figures that incidents of domestic violence have gone up as well, but that's not the case, as Jonathan's just pointed out on page 66. So I don't know if you can disaggregate those two figures, you know, taking away domestic violence from the reported figures on violence against the person and try and get a true figure of how and why those reported incidents of domestic violence have gone down, which I say appears to be counterintuitive, although it's good news and we'll take that. I think you need to understand why that's happening, because if we have a handle on it, it'll be useful in future. Now, I know there are seasonal incidents of domestic violence, and we know that there are certain trigger points for it as well. But I'd be interested to know how those figures have gone down by 21%, whether it's reporting mechanisms or what. I think we need to have a look at that. I'm not suggesting any big piece of work, just to try and get some information through before the next meeting, Chair.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rob. It does seem as though there's some inconsistencies. I know in the last meeting we had, we were told that people who were doing crimes amongst young people was 51%, then we were told it was 39% in the same meeting. So and this is it's bad to lob this on to Jonathan this moment in time, because he's like deputising for Tom, but this maybe is something we can take back of how accurate the figures are that we're getting. And I was reading somewhere that it's not just now reported cases that they're using for the data, that it's actually proven cases where they've actually gone through the courts or they've admitted guilt. I don't know if that's having any impact on the way these are getting reported, because once upon a time it was just reported to the police that we were taking into account with regards to the data. Now I've been told it's just proven cases, which is a big variance between what's reported and what actually goes through the court or they admit guilt to. So maybe that is something we can take back and just have a look at how we are getting the data that we are getting, and whether it's consistent with other data coming from other agencies. So thanks for that, Rob. I don't know if you can comment on that at this moment in time, Jonathan, or it's something you need to maybe take away.
I'll take that away, Chair, and get some further information.
Right. Okay, just with regards to the off-road bikes, I know we're having a lot of issues across the county with regards to young men, usually on uninsured bikes, causing a lot of damage in our communities. I know that there is some work afoot with regards to helping to combat that. Could you come back on that one, Jonathan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yep, as the report highlights some issues over in the Wheatley Hill area. The previous performance report made reference to partnership work that was undertaken through, I believe, Operation Endurance. What I'll do, Chair, I'm aware of a media report in November which showed some impact of that work across both Durham and Darlington, which includes some vehicles which had been crushed, some bikes which had been crushed. I will take some lines of inquiry on that and get an update to the committee on that activity.
Okay, much appreciated. Thank you very much. And again, thanks for taking us through that report, because it was landing on you. Right, do we have any other comments, questions on the performance management? I haven't got anybody indicating. Right, well, we'll go to item 9 on the agenda, which is any other business. I haven't had anything forwarded. I don't know if anybody wants to bring anything up at this particular time. If not, I'd like to wish everybody a happy new year. I should have done that at the beginning of the meeting. That was remiss of me. So, and thanks everybody for making the contributions, especially with the fire report, because I know it has caused a lot of interest in our community. So thanks very much, and thanks most of all to Stuart, and again, congratulations on your award. Thanks very much. We'll see you again. Bye now.
See you, bye.